Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I have here Dr. David Tenenbaum, and he has written a book. He used to work for the U.S. Army. He's a chemical engineer and accused of treason, and I am so interested to hear this story.
That's actually a long story, but and you could stop me at any point in time. I didn't really do chemical engineering in the Army. What I was classified as, they classify you, they put you in different classifications, mechanical engineer. And I was really working on programs that had to do with what I always defined it as. I came into what was called the survivability division. Mm-hmm. And I was specifically in the armor group when I first started working for the Army. And my job, as I always see it, the soldier is our client. That's it. Our job is to make sure the soldier stays safe, soldier comes home alive, unhurt. My job was to look at vehicles such as the M1 tank, Humvees, Bradleys, M113s, land-based vehicles, combat vehicles, transport vehicles, and make sure they had the proper armor and to ensure the guys inside were safe. And I was actually sent to Israel 3 times for the Army. They sent me there for different programs I was working on for other areas. And there were apparently, I didn't realize that when this was at the time, until I didn't find out until much later, that there were people that said, well, you know, he's Jewish. He wears that thing on his head. He speaks Hebrew. He's spying on Israel, on the United States for Israel, based on the fact that I speak Hebrew. Now, keeping in mind, my group was known as like the United Nations. We had a guy from Russia, spoke Russian fluently, German. We had a guy from Iran. We had a guy from Taiwan. And people spoke all different languages. So who did they suspect of doing anything wrong? Me, the Jew, because I was hired because I speak Hebrew, been to Israel. I was suspected because I speak Hebrew and been to Israel. And what would happen is, if you, as one of my colleagues, suspect that I'm doing something inappropriate, it's called a SAIDA. You have to file what's called a subversive act of espionage directed against the Army. You file this, it goes against the FBI, and you know that Tenenbaum guy, you know that Dr. Tenenbaum guy, he's speaking on the phone Hebrew to Israelis. You know, there's a guy he speaks. We had 4 liaison officers on our base: Israel, Britain, Canada, and Germany. He speaks to that Israeli guy, you know, in Hebrew. And that worries us. So the FBI would come in and they do without letting me know, because I never knew this was going on, and they do an investigation. It's called a preliminary investigation. And they would come back and say, I didn't do anything wrong. He's doing his job. Now, they never suspected me of passing on information to the Canadian guy, or the German guy, the Brit. I spoke to everybody because depending on what program I had at the time, I would speak to each of the liaison officers. Mm-hmm. Considering I was sent to the government too, it's very strange, but there were people that would not give up. Now, I didn't find out till later also, there were probably 6 or 7 SAIDAs filed against me at different points in time. And I think pretty much almost the same lead agent from the FBI came and did the investigation, said the guy hasn't done anything wrong. Come with something concrete. Have you ever seen MASH?
Oh,
remember MASH? Okay. So there's a guy in MASH, Colonel Flagg, a communist under every Bush. No one remember that. And the guy that really had problems with me compared him to Colonel Flagg. This is according to people that work for him. He didn't like Jews. He didn't like Israelis, and he thought I was giving information away, and I was being treasonous. And he was working on trying to get me investigated, but the FBI said, we have nothing here. It reached at one point where I came back from one of my trips to Israel. I'd gone to a conference and had meetings, and you have to get debriefed from when you come back from overseas. And I think it's in Defense Investigative Services or military intelligence. We used to call them the Keystone Cops from Selfridge Air Force Base. And you get debriefed right away because you don't want to forget everything. they debriefed me 9 months to a year after I'd come back. And they were saying, what hotel did you stay at? Now, I used to travel a lot. I said, I look to get up in the morning sometimes, look in the mirror and say, who is that? Like, they wanted to know who I spoke to at the conference, what I spoke about, how long I spoke to them, where I spoke to them. I said there were 200-300 people at the conference. I spoke to people dealing with baseball, football, armor, and everything else. I don't have a clue. And that put like, he's not telling us the truth. And it just reached this crescendo where Simonini, who was the guy who did this, was Lieutenant Colonel at the time. There was a secret brief. They were trying to get me they wanted to upgrade my security clearance.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really want to upgrade my security clearance, but if you have your security clearance upgraded, then they can interview you if they want to, without you knowing they are actually under investigation. I think they call that illegal. Mm-hmm. They didn't want me to have an attorney there. I didn't know any of this, but also I didn't want to upgrade in security clearance. So people say, you don't want to upgrade? So, no, with upgrading security clearance comes great responsibility. It's actually a pain in the neck. I didn't want it. And they were like shocked. Spy doesn't want to upgrade security clearance. I didn't want it because I wasn't doing anything wrong, obviously. Till finally my boss at the time, or third line boss, who Simonini spoke to, said, get him to sign off on the paperwork to get a security clearance upgraded. He finally said, you need this. I finally signed off on it. At the same time, Simonini had a briefing. I believe it was at my base at TACOM in Warren, Michigan. High-level people there. It went up to, I think, could have been Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Army, whatever. It was high level. And he said, he put in and said, this guy is a spy. He's spying on U.S. for Israel. And they were like, they pretty much gave him carte blanche to do whatever he wanted. And I didn't know this at the time, but I put in the paperwork. I was told, okay, you're going to have an interview now. It wasn't an interview, it was an interrogation. Mm. The interview started off as, it was good cop, bad cop. Morning, they asked me what I did and everything. And after lunch, they had gone to Simonini, and Simonini said, oh, he's violated all these different regulations, which were totally untrue. And believe me, if it was true, I wouldn't be working for the government. I'd probably be in jail right now. And after lunch, it was, you're probably not familiar with, remember Gordie Howe? We call it the Gordie Howe mushroom treatment. And they said, you've been passing classified information on to the Israelis. This is out of nowhere. I said, what? And they said, no, you've been passing classified information on. I said, I have not done anything of the sort. They said, well, you have to take a polygraph. If you don't, the worst case is you're going to jail. The next best case is you're going to be fired, or you're going to be in a corner the rest of your life. You're never going to do any work again. And I had no idea my rights or anything else. And I'm like, I don't have to take any polygraphs. So I was like, no, you do. Or right now, we're going to cause you all sorts of problems. So finally, they'd gone to like the Simonini, and Simonini told them I'd done all these things, and they were in cahoots with them. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I went to the polygraph. I wanted to record it, and they said, you're not allowed to record a polygraph. Can't record. I thought, it's no big deal. No, you're not allowed to. It's a regulation. It's ridiculous. And I don't know if you know how polygraphs work, but one of the first questions they ask you is, how do you sleep the night before? Taking any drugs, any alcohol? It messes it up. Another thing that messes it up if you get angry, get ticked off. And at the polygraph, the polygrapher got in my face and started yelling at me and said, you're spying for Israel. You've passed classified information on the Israelis. I've done other Jews before. I've gotten them to confess. I'll get you to confess too. And he started naming somebody that he got to confess. And I said, I'm not confessing. He said, I don't want you to confess. I want you to write out your confession. Now, when you get angry, that's it. The polygraph is down the tubes because it can't measure things correctly. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm not writing out a confession. I didn't do anything wrong. And eventually I just left. He said, okay, you can go. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get arrested. I still didn't tell my wife everything. It was on a Thursday, I believe. And I remember going home and thinking to myself, what am I supposed to tell my wife? Like, what do you tell somebody? Oh, you think I'm a spy? I mean, it's ridiculous. And needless to say, I didn't do much sleeping at that point.
Oh,
And
I did not.
he said, you have until, I think it was Monday, to write up to confess. He gave me his personal card. And I ended up going home. And I spoke to a friend of mine who was an attorney, but not the right kind of attorney. And we discussed, whatever. I decided I'd go to work early the next day just to at least get my mind off of it. I went into my office, and I didn't know that Simonini had already told her, the polygrapher went to the FBI and told him I confessed to being a spy, and which obviously he lied. They wanted me to get on the base. They wanted me there. And they said, make sure he gets on the base. Don't tell him anything. The FBI is on its way to the base. And I went to my office. My computer was gone.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, this isn't good. I have to report it. I had an idea of certain things going on. And I tried to get onto the system through somebody else's computer. I didn't exist on the system anymore. It was like I was never there. And I'm cutting the story quickly, but I ended up, I went back to my desk after going to the military police station. I was surrounded by agents, FBI, CIA, DIS, whatever, name an acronym, were probably there. The one person that was not there was Lieutenant Colonel John Simonini, which I always found to be weird. What's going on? Oh, he had a closing on a house, they told me. It's like, wow, I guess that does take precedence over supposedly getting one of the biggest spy cases in not just Michigan, but U.S. history. And I remember that we went into it. It was done all in the open. All my colleagues saw what was going on, and I was accused in the open. And when we went into a room, like me and myself and maybe 10 other people, and the lead FBI agent said, we know this is spying going on. Why don't you tell us what's going on? And I said, why don't you tell me what's going on? And he starts quoting the polygrapher and notes. And I said, well, that's not even right. Everything you're saying, because you can prove what I said because I have all the paperwork. The polygrapher destroyed his notes afterwards. Right? And it turns out that the lead FBI agent did recognize that he said something's wrong here. He didn't say it out loud, but he said something's wrong. And he recognized the polygrapher was lying. And after a little bit of time, I got up. I said, I'm done. If you want to arrest me, arrest me. I'm not sticking around. He said, we have nothing to arrest you on. I said, I know. And I got my stuff and I started walking out, and I figured I'm going to get arrested any moment.
So, I don't mean to cut you off, but basically,
please.
Basically, this one man's prejudice got you all this grief for nothing.
Right, but but everybody else was complacent in it too. The people that could have stopped it didn't stop it. The DIS, the polygrapher, the military intelligence people, they were all. It was like, I don't want to say a conspiracy, but if one person would have stood up and said, this is wrong, even the lead FBI agent, he tried at one point, but he didn't continue it. If he would have just said, I'm not doing this anymore, this is ridiculous. But this is what happened. I was eventually cleared of everything after being suspended for 18 months, and the FBI, having 6 or 7 FBI agents come to my house with guns on our Sabbath on Saturday and taking our house apart with my 2 little kids there at the time, my 1.5-year-old and 4.5-year-old. And even when he came in, the lead FBI agent said, I don't know what I'm doing here. I told him not to do this. He actually said that. He admitted it too. So, I was accused. I was cleared finally. And my security clearance was actually upgraded from secret to top secret when I was cleared. It took another 4 years after that because they wanted to take it away. And I was told by the people I worked for, they said, you will never ever get promoted again. You were lucky. They're not getting rid of you because they just can't get rid of you, but they're going to find a way. And I was told this. And my focus has always been, look for the positives and to always to try to understand to whatever happens, it's a safe type of thing, happens for the best. My job is not to figure out why. My job is to continue forward and do what I've always done, to protect the soldier, to make sure they come back alive. The problem was when I was suspended, they killed the major program I was working on at the time, called the LAST program, Light Armored System Survivability. I was working with the Germans and the Israelis, and we were telling them, this is going back to probably 1990 at least, where actually even before that, we said, if we get into a war situation, the Humvees, as they are now, soldiers will die. There are ammunition, there's types of, I don't know if we called it IEDs at the time, it will go through that vehicle. I have all the paperwork on it. And I said, soldiers are going to die. And they can't, Simonetti had a good hand in canceling the program. And guess what? How many soldiers died, were maimed through IEDs and Humvees? We were working on a solution to it. And it was actually written up in the report from an Inspector General's office that said Dr. Tenenbaum was one of three people that actually even thought ahead and were working on a solution before it happened. And as my attorney said, they have blood on their hands, but nobody knows about it. People don't know because it's not been written up.
Oh, everything's always pushed under the rug, you know?
Correct.
You know, someone in your shoes who could have easily been angry, you'd have been justified at being angry. You decided to turn it into something positive, move forward, keep going like you're supposed to be going. But I for one, I mean, I'm angry for you.
It's not my job in this world to take revenge on anybody. If the government wants these people, that's their business. I have a job to do. I remember I had an attorney at one point when we were suing the government, really nice guy. We were at the federal courthouse downtown after we just had gone through a deposition. I remember him looking at me outside the courthouse. He said, you know, Tenenbaum, you should be in jail. I said, excuse me? He said, you should be in jail. I said, I didn't do anything wrong. You know that. He said, that's not the point. I know you didn't do anything wrong. But if the government wants to put you in jail, they will put you in jail. You don't understand how it works. I said, I know. He said, I don't get it. I said, truthfully, the difference between you and me is that I don't know his background, but I said, I believe in God. It's faith. And if it's supposed to happen, it will happen. My job is to protect the soldier. That's what I've always done. And the problem is, if you work in the government, you see people get more concerned with, did you dot the I, cross the T? Did you take the proper training? Like, did you take your quote manager training courses where you see certificates on somebody's wall, all full of, I've taken all these manager courses, and they're horrendous managers. It's like, great, paste a piece of paper on the wall. Years after this, I went to a meeting. I can't get into the details, but I went to a meeting and there's somebody there that was very familiar with the casualties. I call them kids, casualties in Humvees, what was left of them. And this person looked at me, literally crying, and said, you guys are the ones that are responsible for making sure our kids come home alive. Why didn't you do it? You're the ones responsible for designing the vehicles. Why didn't you do it? It's your fault. And I said, I tried. I did the best I could, but my programs were canceled. I had nothing to do with it. I did the best I could. And I will never, ever forget the look on the person's face. And I've always taken the way of doing things. I tell my kids, you got to try. You can't fail if you don't try. And you also have to stand up for what you believe in and make sure whatever you do inspires other people to move in a positive direction as well. And I hope that maybe for my book that people will see, you know what? You don't have to come away with something to look like, oh, poor me, poor me. It's not what we're supposed to do. Maybe it'll empower other people to do the right things. I mean, we've been trying for a long time to get, I wish I had connections in the Hollywood area because celebrities have an ability to get stories out there that we little people can't do. I've tried politicians, I've tried a lot of things, but I'm not giving up. I was actually told by someone who shall not be named, who said to me, you know, whenever your name is mentioned in the Inspector General's office in the Department of Defense, who put out a report that said it was anti-Semitism, and when your name is mentioned, there's usually a 4-letter adjective attached to the front of it. I said, huh, I think I can guess, but I won't. I don't use that kind of language, but I think I can guess.
Thank you. I
So
try
I thought it was
to
funny.
avoid that kind of language myself.
Yeah. You know, we teach our kids that you mess up, take responsibility for it, say you're sorry, move on, but learn from it. In the government, there's no accountability.
No.
There's no transparency. And transparency would lead to accountability. In my case, it's people lying. You go higher up, they lie, the next person does also. And that's not the way I grew up. It's like, you know, take it like a man. You messed up, move forward.
Right.
As a friend of mine said, or actually somebody heavily involved in my case said to me, if this happened in private industry, this would have been fixed so many years ago. In February was my 24th anniversary of dealing with this. We're still dealing with it. I had an opportunity. There are people that told me things which will never go put in a book, and they said you can use this. This will show certain things. I don't want to even speak about that. I said, if I use that story you're telling me, which I know is true, and I can verify it. I said, all I'm going to succeed in doing is destroying the person's family and themselves. What's the point of that? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in pointing out the people that did wrong that have never admitted guilt, and even the people that I had stories about. There's no point in doing it to anybody. I mean, I could look at it, and someone once asked me how it affected, like you brought out, people turn to drugs, people turn to alcohol, how it affected me and why maybe I wasn't affected the same way. And I think I always call it more the three things, the 3 F's: faith, family, and friends. There was not one friend of mine, not one person in my community, I was an Orthodox Jew and community, mostly Jews. No one ever believed I did anything wrong. My family totally backed me to the hilt. And faith, believing there's a higher power, God, that's making sure there's reasons behind things, and we just don't know. We're not privy to it all. So so things happen to us, so we can learn from it and maybe be an inspiration. Who knows? I think of myself as an inspiration. It's kind of funny, but maybe we're supposed to be there as an example for other people to look at. And I mean, definitely. I mean, I increased my workouts. I put it like that. I work out whenever I deal with the case. But the one thing I can never really forgive is it took time away from my family. Because when you're facing, and I was facing, life imprisonment or the death penalty, and I was told there's a good chance you're going to jail, and I was told if you go, you're never getting out. Facing that on a daily basis for almost 18 months, never knowing, am I going to jail? Am I going to get the death sentence for something I never did anything wrong? It takes away from your ability to spend time with your family because you're focused. You're focused on this all the time. Even when it was done, I sued the government, and you're focused on just, you're consumed in a way with trying to make things right. But I've learned, over the past 3 years, like, you can't be consumed, and to take it more. Like, my daughters taught me a lot. My wife, my boys helped me a lot in terms of, this is what's important in life. This is, anything else is just, dressing. It's great to do, but it's not about the job. It's about what you do with yourself. It's about how you handle yourself. It's not the tests we go through. It's how we deal with the tests. And I think this is just a test. So, and what I try to tell people too, it's not just a Tenenbaum issue. People think, oh, you're just trying to do it for yourself. I say, you don't understand. It's not a Tenenbaum issue. It's not a Jewish issue. It affects anybody who's different. It's a systemic issue. And it's, as one person, I don't know who it was, a high-level government employee said, it's because they said, well, they invoked the state secrets privilege about 2.5 years after we sued, and we went through all the discovery, which I'll tell you a story about that. But it's not state secrets, it's state embarrassment. And when you're in a deposition, I remember Simonides in the deposition. We're in this deposition, and he's sitting with his attorney. I'm sitting with my attorney. The stenographer sitting at the head of the table. I don't even remember the question that was asked. All I remember is Simonides is paraphrasing his answer, and he said something like, "Jews are different. It's just part of their culture. It's the kind of things that they do." And again, paraphrasing, they pulled him out of that deposition so quickly. I watch a stenographer. It's like watching like one of these comedy TV shows. Stenographer is typing. She just looked up. She stopped typing. I looked at my attorney. I said, "Did he just say what I think he said?" And they pulled him out. And about a week or so later, they invoked the state secrets privilege. And people, high-level government people that supported me in the case, that tried to get it done right, got fired. A couple people got fired partially because of me. We should stand up because it's the right thing to do. It's bullying. It's bullying in a way at its best. If you saw somebody being bullied, I don't think you'd say, "Oh, it's too bad," and walk away. Bullies get away with it because no one stands up to them. When someone stands up to them, all of a sudden, oh yeah, I better watch myself. But in my case, there hasn't been any accountability. But I'll keep on fighting for what's right. But it's because my job is still to protect the soldier, even though they're still trying to get rid of me. I don't want you to think that, oh gosh, it never bothers me. Of course it does. There are definitely times that, yeah, it's and then, you know what I do? I'll work out for a couple. I'll actually go work out for a couple hours. Even when I wrote my dissertation, I interviewed people like me that really went through where the government took advantage and there was never accountability, and some very famous people, and I wrote them up. And I remember approaching one person in particular to interview for my dissertation, because I compared what happened to us as going through the 5 or 7 stages of the grief process. And this one person, again, I won't say who, but he actually won his case against the government. There's a but there. The same thing happened to him that happened to me. He said when he sued the government said, "Oh no, it's state secrets." And he said, "You're lying." Something happened that could prove that he was right, and they were lying. The same in my case, because I don't have necessarily the concrete proof. I have proof, but they're not willing to listen to it. And they were going to take away, I think, the law licenses. I mean, I could be wrong on this. Sanction the government attorneys involved and take away the license. He settled for quite a bit of money, and I wanted to interview him, and he said, "I can't." I said, "I understand." He said, "No, you don't." I said, "Yeah, I understand. It's not that you can't, that the government told you can't, but the effect it had on you, even though you won, and even though he went through maybe 4 or 5 years of having to deal with it, the effect it has on you in a psychological way or whatever, you don't want to dredge it up again. You just don't." And I said, "You don't have to say anything to me. You don't owe me an apology." Super nice guy. "So you don't owe me an apology. I just, God willing, everything should go well with you and everything should be fine." That was my last conversation with him. But I think the people that have more difficulty, I don't think they necessarily had backing from, I'm guessing, family, friends, faith. I don't know. But all I know is that, yes, it does affect me periodically, but affect and take over are 2 different ways of looking at it. It doesn't take over my life.
Is there like some social media or website that people can go to so they can get to know more about you?
The website is drdavidatenenbaum.com. It's Dr. David A. Tenenbaum. Spelling my name, it's Tenenbaum.com. If you go onto that website, there's quite a bit of information. If you actually go on Amazon, look up the book, they actually have what do they call the flaps? So they talk a little bit about it too. It's called "Accused of Treason: The U.S. Army's Witch Hunt for a Jewish Spy." It's really been a pleasure meeting you and talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I can
and-
say the
and-
same. To everybody that watches us and listens to us, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this segment. Keep supporting the channel, because without you, we just couldn't do it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network